Once we have defined the title section of the application, the next step is to define the main content of the menu that we saw in the demo application. How can we do this? Well, as part of the grid that we have defined previously, remember that we create a set of different columns and rows to delimit the space where each of the sections of the measures that we will be able to press to go to the conversions page will be located. For a good organization of the code, in this grid layout, we're going to create a set of regions to separate each section of the measures with the purpose of moving quickly between them in case we need it. Remember that to insert a region, we can do it by right-clicking on the XAML file, insert snippet, and we have the option that says region. Let's create the first region, which is going to contain the section to be able to go to the conversion between information units. Then let's type information. I'm going to copy this region a few more times, and I'm going to change each of the regions for each of the measures. The second region will contain the volume measurement. The third section will contain the length measurement. The next section will contain the mass measurement. The next section, the temperature measurement. The next section has to do with the energy measurement. The next section will be the area measurement. The next section has to do with the measure velocity. And the last section has to do with units of measure duration. Once we have done this, we will go to the first region called information, and we will define the controls for this first section. Let's create a grid. Let's assign some properties, for example, that we want to place the grid in the row number 1. And this makes sense because remember that the first row is being occupied by the title of the application. So let's assign to the grid.row property the value 1. Let's also assign a padding equal to 15 and specify a background color equal to static resource and use app color 1. With this change made, let's recompile the application to see the applied changes. When we visualize the application, we see very little space for this grid. This is happening because in the part of the definition of the columns, I forgot to put a dot in the last definition of the columns. With this change, we can now see the grid being drawn using the corresponding space. In this space is where we're going to place a couple of controls to define the visual appearance. Within this grid, I will define a set of rows to place first an image and below the name of the measure that we want to use. Then let's assign to the row definitions property a first row that will have 70% of space and the second row 30%. Once we have defined the rows, the next step is to use the icons from a font to display them in the application. Therefore, I will import a font file that I have previously generated through Fontello, as we have seen in a previous lesson. Let's stop the execution of the application, and in the Solution Explorer, I will drag the new font into the folder named Fonts. Once I have imported the font, I will go to the Maui program file, and I will register the font. For this, I write fonts.addFont. I write the name of the font, that is Fontello, and I'm going to assign an alias that is equal to icons. For this application, the icons that we are going to use are those that you are seeing in screen, same that are part of the font that I have imported previously in Visual Studio. Once I have configured the font, I'm going to return to the XAML file, and inside the grid that I have previously defined, I'm going to create an image control. We're going to use the image source of the image control to set a font image source, to which we will assign some properties such as the font family, that is going to be equal to icons. The glyph is going to be equal to ampersand symbol, hash symbol, xf0a0, semicolon. Let's set the size equal to 50 and close the label. If we start the execution of the application, we can already display the icon in the image control. The next step is to create the label that shows us what is the measure that we're going to use for it. After the image control, let's create a label control. Let's position it in the row number 1. Let's assign its horizontal options equal to the center. Let's set the text equal to information. Let's set the text color equal to static resource text color. And finally, vertical text equal to center. Something that is very important is that you have to write the text in the label as I am showing you, since we're going to use this text later to know which is the measure that we want to use in the conversions page. Then, once we make these changes, let's see how they look in the emulator. Here we can see the first section being displayed correctly. Once we've done that, we're going to copy the entire contents of the grid. I'm going to compress the region, I'm going to go to the next region, I'm going to paste the content, and I'm going to perform some changes to the volume section. First, I'm going to position this element in column number 1, since I want to place this section after the information section. Next, I indicate that the background color is going to be the same as app color 2. Also, the glyph is going to be equal to F1V2, and I am also going to assign a text equal to volume. I will repeat the steps, so I copy the grid and its contents, I will go to the next region, I paste the content, and in this case, in the section of the length measure, I'm going to place the section in column number 2. Let's use the background color app color 3. The glyph is going to be equal to F044, and the text is going to be equal to length. I'm going to copy the grid one more time. I close the region. In the case of the mass measure, I set grid.row equal to 2. I remove the column since it is not required. The background color is going to be equal to app color 2. The glyph will be equal to F24E. The text is going to be equal to mass. I'm going to copy the contents of the grid one more time. I go to the next region, which is the temperature region. I indicate that in the case of temperature, I want to place the section in row number 2. In this case, we need a column to be equal to 1. The background color is going to be equal to app color 3. The glyph is going to be equal to E803. And the text is going to be equal to temperature. I'm going to go back to the previous section because I misspelled the mass text. I'm going to copy the temperature region. I'm going to go to the next region, which is the energy region. And in the case of this section, I'm going to indicate that the row is going to be equal to 2. The column is going to be number 2. The background color is going to be equal to app color 1. I'm also going to set the glyph to be equal to F525. The text to be equal to energy. Again, I copy the grid, I go to the next region in the content, and in the case of the area, we have to specify that the row is going to be equal to 3. We don't have to specify a column because it's going to be in column number 0. The background color is going to be equal to app color 3, the glyph is going to be equal to F1FE, and finally, the text is going to be equal to area. I copy the grid again, I go to the next region, which is the speed region, and in this case I indicate that the row is going to be equal to 3. The column is equal to 1, the background color is going to be equal to color 1, the glyph is going to be equal to E82A, and finally the text is going to be equal to speed. One last time I copy the grid, I go to the next region. In the case of this grid, the row is going to be equal to 3, and the column is going to be equal to 2. The background color is going to be app color 2. The glyph is going to be equal to E800, and the text is going to be equal to duration. Once we have made these changes, we restart the application to see how it looks. And now we can see the main screen that will show us each of the measures that we will be able to press to go to the conversions page according to the selected type.